Staff at the Department of Homeland Security and co-founder of the political party Forward, Miles Taylor, is back. He's the author of the forthcoming book, Blowback. Also with me at the table, Basil Smikle is here, Democratic strategist and director of the public policy program at Hunter College. Miles, you've been warning about political violence for as long as you've been coming on this program. What are your thoughts today?
Nicolle, it's obviously a deeply disturbing attack, and there's one point of it that I really want to zoom in on, and that is the suspect allegedly went into the office and said, "Where is Jerry?" And this was really resonant to me. Why? Because we saw with the attack at Pelosi's home, the suspect went in and said, "Where is Nancy?" The people who stormed the Capitol said, "Where are they?" referring to members of Congress. We had someone show up at Pramila Jayapal's home with a gun. Where is Pramila? These people are not just engaging in random acts of violence. It is clear to me that America's public servants are not just being hounded, they are being hunted. And that book you pointed to, Nicolle, I talk about this in Blowback. And one of the big takeaways is we are seeing a statistical surge in threats against America's public servants. But again, it's not random. What we are seeing is in a lot of these cases, these individuals are responding to the call from political extremists who are telling them to take things to a violent place. You know, Eric Swalwell and I were talking about this, and he talked especially about his Republican colleagues who see their rhetoric like professional wrestling. They think it's just entertainment. But here's the problem. Their supporters don't see it as entertainment. They see it as a call to action. So when they're taking a baseball bat to democracy, their supporters actually go take a baseball bat to congressional staffers. That's what's worrying. And I think the last point I would leave you with on that, Nicolle, is I was talking to someone who prepares what's called the PDB, the President's Daily Brief that you're familiar with. It's that intelligence the president gets every morning. And that PDB preparer said, you know, the thing that worries me more is not as much threats from China and Russia and terrorists. It's that the threats here at home against America's public servants are one of the biggest national security threats we face. And I think that's very telling that our intelligence professionals are now looking inward instead of outward about the biggest threats to America.
Your thoughts about sort of how we protect staffers who are, you know, Capitol Hill staffers went running for their lives on January 6th. District office staffers are probably a little more nervous today, a lot more nervous today than they were yesterday. What do we do for them?
Well, you know, Nicolle, the symbolism, as you note, is incredibly dispiriting. And I'm glad you mentioned January 6th in this regard. I mean, there's something sort of a personal anecdote that I want to share with you. I started my career like an intern, but in my case, it's what was called a congressional page. I worked on the House floor. You run errands for members of Congress as a high school student. And the desk that I sat at in the back of the chamber is the best view you can have of American democracy. That same desk that inspired me to go into public service was the desk they pushed in front of the doors to barricade the House chamber to keep insurrectionists from storming in. So over the course of 20 years, that place went from a place of inspiration for young people to a desk where they sat as the last line of defense to protect the citadel of democracy. That just goes to show you how far we've come since 9/11, where we were inspiring people to go into public service. Now, unfortunately, the people that do that are literally getting physically attacked. If that's not a wake-up call, I do not know what is.
To have someone who's electable in a statewide, never able to win a primary is sort of this cage of the Republicans' own making, right?
Yeah, it's a really weird thing happening right now, Nicolle, is that Republicans love their losers at the moment. And the only thing I would take issue with on the States United data, and they are fantastic and their data is spot on, but that there are still a lot of these people winning, and they're winning, you know, big races around the country. And we've got these election deniers in office. And you have to ask yourself why this is happening. Well, these fringe candidates are getting elected by a fringe electorate. And the reason, I think the source of a lot of this is closed primaries across the country. Now, if you look at all the data, what's the number one political affiliation of the plurality of Americans? It's not Republican, it's not Democrat. The plurality of Americans are independents. But independents are forbidden in most states from voting in their primaries. So the result is you often have fringe people on the extremes voting for people in the primaries, and then independents don't really get to have a say of who's on the general election ballot, and a lot of those are centrists. So at the end of the day, you could really make the argument that these closed primaries are killing democracy by delivering us a lot of these extreme right-wing candidates without the opportunity for independents to squash it earlier in the process before they have no other choice at the polls.